Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1000 to 2000 ELO in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Today we have a Caro Kann. My opponent goes for the knight c3 line. I do quite like the g6 lines, known as the Gurganitsa system, which you can find on some previous episodes on the channel of the speedrun. However, today we're going to take and go for what's known as the Tartakower. Tartakower was a chess player, I'm sure. And the point is that you offer a trade of knights here. Ooh, okay. So you offer a trade of knights, right? And you're willing to double your f-pawns, but this pawn is actually quite a good asset. My opponent, however, goes knight to g5. A lot of you will know that this is the alien Gambit, and after h6, knight f7, king f7, things can get a little bit spicy. Now, I am aware that you can go h6, take. I think the line's something like knight f3, c5, and technically that is the best line for black. However, I'm going to be linking a video down below, or you can just search it on my channel. But it's basically a video that I made a few weeks ago with recommending this bishop to f5 setup against the alien Gambit. And this setup is really, really good. This is one of the main lines of the setup. And what you basically say is, okay, your knight's cool on the g5 square. However, I'm not going to be playing h6 to encourage you to take. I'm just going to leave your knight there, and it's going to look a little bit silly. My opponent plays a, what, g4? Excuse me? Well, that's unexpected, to say the least. Well, that's obviously a free pawn. And I think we probably have to take it. If we retreat, h4 looks pretty scary. So we have to take the pawn, I think. The question is, do we take with the knight or take with the bishop? Taking with the bishop, we can get a tempo on the queen, which is maybe useful. Taking with the knight, our bishop maintains control of e6. Well, if the bishop takes, it maintains control of e6 anyway. So I think I'm going to take with the bishop. I don't really see how this can be a bad move. Okay, f3, that's fine. White wastes a little bit of my time, but achieves basically nothing in return. Also, you should be very aware of how vulnerable this diagonal could become later on. So I think we'll just drop our bishop back to f5 and basically say thank you for the free pawn. Also, d4 is weak still. And most likely, we'll continue with normal developing moves. Bishop d6 or bishop to e7 is likely. Knight b to d7 is very likely. We maybe can strike with c5, but we do have to be a little bit careful about bishop to b5 check lines, because our bishop can't come back to help defend. And this is just a very comfortable looking position, to be fair. I think it should also be noted that we do have queen a5 check, hitting anything on the 5th rank, which could come in useful later on. Okay, bishop to f4. I think that bishop d6 should be pretty much automatic. I'm expecting probably knight e2, defending the bishop, offering the trade to bring the knight forwards, which looks like a relatively aggressive option. I don't think it's particularly concerning, though. I think we should still go for it. I'm always keeping an eye on whether my opponent can take on e6 or f7 as well, but I don't think so. Okay, bishop g3 doesn't seem particularly good. I'm half tempted to play bishop g6, setting up a threat of queen to a5 check, picking up the knight. I suppose bishop g3 doesn't allow me to go knight bd7 because I'd hang my bishop, so that's also true. I could play the move h6, but I don't really want to encourage the knight to move, I don't think. I think I'd rather let it sit where it is for now, because it's actually not all that useful. If I drop my bishop back, what is white likely to play? Because you could argue this is just a trick, right? Knight d5 looks very tempting, opening up an attack on the knight. And also, just getting my knight on d5 to block this bishop off. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. And again, I go through this setup that I'm playing in a video on my channel, which I can't remember the name of, but I will link it below. So yeah, h6 is tempting. I don't think taking on g3 is a good idea. There's no reason to be opening up this rook. That seems insanely stupid. What else do we have? I'm trying to think if we have an immediate queen to a5 check, but I think just c3, and we don't really have anything. Again, knight d5 is relatively tempting. My opponent's telling me to play fast in the game chat, so not sure why. I think he wants me to blunder. Yeah, I'm kind of deciding. Do I go bishop g6? Do I go knight d5? Do I go h6? They're all options. If bishop g6, knight to h3, obviously defending the knight, so I don't have queen a5 check. Also, it's just developing the knight, which looks natural. Maybe then I go h6. Now that everything is secured, if knight back to e4, I could take. I could go ahead and take. That should be okay. What other options do I have? I think I like bishop g6. I did mention in my video on the Alien Gambit that bishop g6 is a move a lot of the time. Obviously, in this scenario, I'm kind of trying to set up this fork. I like the fact that bishop defends f7, so there's never any knight takes f7 ideas. You could argue that I'm no longer defending the e6 pawn, and there might be ideas to take the pawn, but currently there is absolutely no ideas to be taking the pawn, because I'll just go queen to e7 at the end of the line. And after a move like queen to e2, I mean, I can probably just play like a bishop f5 or bishop to f7 and secure a queen trade, because whatever piece ends up there will have to move, and, you know, queens off the board is a good thing. But okay, my opponent does go knight 1 to h3. I think I like the look of the move h6, forcing the knight back to e4. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, preparing bishop d5 could be useful, although the bishop coming back to d3 is often more annoying than the bishop on this diagonal. So I, again, did mention that idea in that video, where sometimes you can go for this kind of setup. Also against the von Hennig Gambit, but you want to be aware that bishop d3 could actually just be helping white. So, good to be aware of. Again, I don't really want to be taking this bishop. That seems to make no sense. We could play a move like queen c7, actually threatening to win the bishop, which wouldn't be a terrible idea. Also, that does prepare knight bd7, because we wouldn't be cutting the connection between the queen and the bishop. If something like queen c7, rook g1 defending, knight bd7 looks relatively nice. Again, h6 is a move. I think I like h6. I think I like it. So, like, this is what I like to do against the Alien Gambit. So on move 5 after knight g5, obviously pawn h6, knight f7 is the main line. But what I like to do is essentially get my pieces out. Obviously, my opponent went for this queen g4 line, which I've never seen before, to be fair. But I like to get my pieces out, and then when there is no threat of the knight taking anything, then I'll play h6. So, okay. The knight comes to e4. I don't think you should automatically do this. I don't think you should do that automatically. I think maybe white can even castle kingside there. I think there's definitely a case to be made for taking with the bishop. And after pawn takes, knight takes, this bishop is under serious threat. But I think I don't want to lose this bishop, because it's a very valuable defensive piece. So let's take with the knight. Knight e4, pawn e4, I assume, is the only move, and I think it makes sense to take with the bishop. Obviously, we're also hitting the rook. My opponent could castle kingside. I don't think that's a problem. We can probably just drop the bishop back somewhere. I could even go knight d7, maybe. Yeah, he does castle. Maybe now I should take the bishop. That actually seems like a very good idea. There's no immediate threat. Obviously, this piece is pointed at my king, but there's no threats. There's no threats. And we're up 2 pawns, but we're lacking in development. I think castling is a good idea here. You may be, again, scared of all the pieces that could be coming for the king, but there's no threats. Like, yeah, my opponent just goes c3, because we actually do have good pressure here. Like, there's nothing obvious that just wins the game here for white. So, yeah, let's just continue trying to make good moves. b5 is actually a move in a lot of lines, trying to kick the bishop back, but it seems unnecessary for the time being. I would like to play bishop to g6, however, knight to f4 hits the bishop and threatens to win the pawn on e6 with relatively dire consequences, so I don't want to allow that. Queen d6 may be tempting to hit the pawn, but my opponent could probably just play a move like queen g4, which I don't really want to, encourage. Knight d7 is probably one of the better moves. c5 is also a move that shouldn't be discarded. Trying to go for a queen trade. Although, even if a queen trade is secured, I'm not sure I actually like the position that follows with a move like rook d7, b4 to support the c5 pawn. I don't really like that. So, let's go knight d7. My bishop can always come to f5 as well. So if, like queen g4, I have bishop to f5. Okay, the rook comes to f4. Well, now I can go to g6, actually. Now I can come to g6, because now there's no knight to f4 hitting the bishop. And if my opponent reconfigures his pieces in a way that allows his knight to come to f4, I can always move the bishop to f5 or move it to h7, that's not a problem. My opponent brings more pieces into the attack. I don't think it's particularly scary, to be honest. He's not threatening anything. I like the look of e5, hitting the pawn and the rook. If you take, then knight takes and attack over. If e5 and the rook moves, let's say rook to g4, an interesting idea, because my bishop is technically undefended because the pawn is pinned to the king. I could play bishop to h5 there, and I think I just win the exchange. I think this is a good idea. Here. Yeah, he doesn't have enough attackers. Let's go e5 and try and open up the center. I mean, it's obviously a very common motif in chess in general, where if you're being attacked on one side of the board, which we clearly are being attacked on the king's side, then it can be a good idea to try to open up the center, because not only does it allow your pieces to better access the other side of the board, so, let's say take, our knight can get to the king's side very easily, but also it allows for better chances of counterplay, because let's say the d file were to open up, or let's say white takes and this diagonal opens up, I have decent counterplay ideas then. Whereas with the center locked, I can defend myself for sure. I can probably play a move like knight to f6 and bring the knight to d5, and maybe that's an even better idea than what I played. But I'm very much just shelling up in that scenario. And again, there's nothing wrong with shelling up necessarily, but you can open up the play by blasting open the center when your opponent is trying to attack you on one side of the board. So I hope that concept makes sense. Again, it's a very common, thematic idea in chess strategy, and something that will probably help you a lot. Not necessarily just to blast open the center at every opportunity when you're being attacked, but just to be aware of it. Okay, my opponent goes rook to g4. But yeah, I think bishop to h5 is just a problem, because, yeah, he's got loads of things pointing at my king, but he has no threat. What he may be trying to do is, after bishop to h5, play rook takes g7 check, king takes, and queen takes h5, which looks scary. Again, I don't think there's any follow-ups. It looks scary, though. Worth being aware of. However, my bishop is under threat of being taken currently. So I do need to address that threat. Again, I can't just play that knight f6 because my opponent will take and my pawn cannot recapture because of the pin. Oh my god, I can't draw arrows. So okay, yeah, bishop h5. The only move seems to be rook g7, king g7, queen h5. Queen f6 looks like a good move there. If rook f1, queen g6, I offer a queen trade. I counterattack the g3 pawn. This knight still has no way into the game because I'm controlling its forward movement. I think I like the look of that. I don't think I'm missing anything. Yeah, that looks fine. I assume he is going to take on g7 because, like I said, that seems like the natural thing to go for. And the only thing that really continues any semblance of an attack. I think it's also worth noting that my opponent played the Alien Gambit with a very specific intention. He played the Alien Gambit to try to attack me, right? Which, like, on one level is, like, obviously. But also, my opponent is not trying to just have a chill game. I may be trying to play, you know, this very chill bishop to f5 line, and e6, and just develop my pieces, and then kick the knight away. My opponent didn't play the Alien Gambit trying to do that. He played it to be aggressive, and he's playing aggressively. And yeah, we've won a couple pawns. We've won an exchange. Rook f1 played. I think just queen g6 should be very, very nice. The game's certainly not over. You know, a move like queen to f3 avoids a queen trade and defends the g3 square, but you know, white's running out of firepower. He most likely wants to bring this knight to f4 when possible. I do have the move e4 here, trying to deflect the queen from the defense of g3, but I don't think it really works because, I mean, e4, let's say queen to e3, preparing knight to f4. I can't stop knight f4. So it's not that simple. What else can I do here? What else can I do? I could play f5, which, as dumb as it looks, actually might be a good move. Just trying to take space. And if take, of course, we fork the queen and the bishop. Although we do have to be aware of this diagonal. Which is, yeah, maybe annoying. Maybe annoying. What else do we have? We should take our time here. Try and figure this out. Because this is a pivotal point in the game. If we can secure our extra material, then we can convert this. Rook a to e8 looks like a good idea as well. Just defending e5. If take again, we fork. Also, keeping the tension means that knight to f4 still can't be played. If pawn d5, I don't think that really does anything. I think we just have knight to b6 there, attacking the bishop and the pawn. And we have, like, e4 intermezzos. There's loads of things there. So that looks very nice. Also, I like rook a to e8 because we stop bishop d3 because we have the move e4. Bishop d3 isn't game-ending by any means, but it's annoying. It would be annoying for white to take control of this diagonal. White is going to... Well, white's only chance to attack me here is to try and make good use of his light-squared bishop because, you know, he sacked a rook for my light-squared bishop, so he needs to try and make use of this. But I'm going to try everything I can to not allow that. And yeah, I'm well aware my king is weak, but we can defend this. Again, f5 isn't a terrible idea. It's not a ludicrous idea whatsoever to take space later on. I'm trying my absolute hardest to stop knight to f4 because I don't want to allow this knight into the attack Because then maybe things get a little bit scary. I should still be okay, but like, there's no point allowing that. And the way I'm doing it is currently I'm defending f4, and if take, then I will take with tempo. So you don't have time for knight to f4. If take knight f4, I take the queen with check, and I'm completely winning. Also, the bishop is hanging in those lines. So, you know, doing a good job. But we are down to 5 minutes. I still need to be nice and accurate here. But hopefully this video does a good job at showing you guys, like, when you're facing the Alien Gambit or other Gambits against the Caro Kann, like the Von Hennig, which I've also done a video on, just stay calm. Your opponent may sacrifice material. They may even insist upon sacrificing material in some manner, like my opponent has done here. That's not necessarily a cause for panic, though. Just play good chess. Okay, Queen f2, a very interesting move. I assume the point is to take, and after takes, you do have knight to f4 because the queen is no longer under attack. Also, maybe to try to access this diagonal. Okay, f6 looks like a decent move. If take, we can probably take with the pawn, to be fair. Yeah, I think I like this. Also just, you know, massively over-defending e5, I'm well aware. If take, my opponent could go for a7, but that hangs g3, and, you know, you're just going to lose the game very quickly. So this queen is kind of tied down to the defense of the g3 pawn. I'm also very happy my opponent's moved the queen to f2, because the queen no longer defends the d3 square, which means even if something happens to this pawn, I don't have to worry about bishop to d3 anymore, because I will just take it. The bishop has no support. So that's also very promising. This knight also just genuinely has no moves. I can consider moves like queen to g4 maybe in the future. Although, of course, there is, like, you know, king to h2 or king to g2 defending the knight. But it would be a potentially a strong move just to take space in the position. Although, you know, maybe I give the bishop this diagonal if I do that. But then I maybe have e4. So, you know, give and take. Give and take. Okay, bishop back to b3. I assume the idea is to try and go bishop to c2 with the support of the queen. I think I'm going to go queen g4. So bishop c2 now no longer comes with tempo. f6 is well defended. My queen doesn't need to be defending that. Let's put pressure on the knight and on the pawn. King g2. I have this check if I want it. I'm not really sure what it accomplishes right now, though. However, what I can do is I can take. And here is a great example of something I say on the channel all the time, which I think I actually learned from Daniel Naroditsky, which I'm sure the majority of you will be aware of. If not, he's an awesome YouTuber. Love him. And what he says a lot of the time is that if you put your pieces, I may be paraphrasing this, if you put your pieces on active squares, then tactics will tend to work out in your favor. The reason my opponent hasn't taken back here is because rook to e2 pins the queen to the king. And just because I put my pieces on active squares, the tactics just happen to work out in my favor, right? But my opponent recognizes the threat. He goes knight to f4. That defends this. Also potentially threatens knight to e6, check, forking these. I like the look of knight to c5, attacking the bishop and defending e6. Now, it does also block my queen's defense of d4, which is worth noting. If knight c5, queen d4, I can take here. There's no queen d7 because my queen defends that square. If knight here, bishop back, I think I have pawn d3 there. I think that's winning. Yeah, this line looks nice. This line looks nice. And if my opponent takes, either I can take the bishop, which I probably should do, or I can even consider knight to e4. which also looks really strong. Oh, also, worth noting, there is no knight to e6, even if I don't play knight c5, because I just noticed my queen is also helping out in the defense. My queen is on such a strong square. Such a strong square. Part of the reason I moved it forward, I obviously didn't envision that it would be defending e6 and that that would be important. I just thought, well, it's an active square, we hit the knight, and we control some more squares, because when I do play queen g4, it's with tempo. My opponent has to respond to the threat, so I don't lose any time whatsoever by playing the move queen g4. But I open the queen up to way more avenues than it had on g6, right? So, again, if you have active pieces, tactics will often work out in your favor. And my opponent needs to figure out how he's going to respond to this. How is he going to respond? Maybe queen to d4 is the best idea, although, you know, it doesn't look particularly appealing. Again, we can take the bishop. We could even consider knight to e4, just attacking g3, which isn't that easy to defend. You do have rook to f3, but then you have to watch out for like knight g5, hitting the rook, and maybe preparing queen h3, although h3 is defended by the knight. If queen takes, it might just be easiest to take the bishop, but we shouldn't jump to that conclusion too quickly. But I am thinking that this is probably white's best try. So okay, let's calculate this properly. Queen d4. I know we can take the bishop, so let's check knight to e4 first. Rook to f3. Do we have anything? Trying to calculate like taking in rook e2, but that kind of thing doesn't seem to work. That's not a move I even considered. Okay, bishop to to d1, attacking my queen, forcing her off of her nice square. Queen d7 is the first move that comes to mind, defending the d-pawn. Although I do give the knight the h5 square, but the knight already has access to h5. That's a very, very nice idea. What else do we have? It's a really good move. A really strong move. I could go queen g5, which might be better. I think queen g5 is better. Reason being is that I want to try to defend f6. Also defends the knight, which is useful. Because I was concerned after queen d7 about knight to h5, going after the f6 pawn with check. And that just looks incredibly uncomfortable. Now, I could go king to g6, and I will be defending. If bishop c2, I have d3. So if king to g6, what else can my opponent do? Could come back, but then I will go to h7 most likely. And you don't have knight back to h5 with check. King g6. I could also consider king to h8. Knight f6. Rook to e6. And you can't defend the knight, actually. So that's probably easier. That's probably the easier move, just to get the king in the corner. Also on a dark square, so this bishop can't touch it. And this knight will struggle to attack the king, because it needs a couple moves to even see the king. You'd have to do something like this. And obviously, that's defended for now. We could also put a rook on g8 in some lines, which is useful. Again, I don't think you can take because of rook to e6. You have no other way of defending the knight. And you can't move the knight because you'll lose your queen with check, which is important. So very nice. Very nice. Okay. Queen takes on d4. That's more so what I was expecting. But I think we can go here and force a queen trade. You can win a pawn. Not sure if I want to allow that. I'm up in exchange, though. Okay, so I can bail out. I can bail out. I also have rook to d8 going for this. Although there's no real good follow-up. Maybe I can take the bishop, then the knight. Let's see, rook d8. Queen f2. Well, no, then I have this. And you lose. Probably. So here, where else can the queen go? Let's say queen c4. Check. King g1. Doesn't look great. But I could just go for a trade. I could just go for the trade. Queen d5, queen d5, pawn d5, knight f6. Where do I put the rook? Rook d8? Maybe. Bishop, no, bishop can't go to c2. Bishop g4. I think that works. I think that works. Oh, wait. No, the d file's shut. What am I on about? It's still fine, though. It's just less accurate than I thought it was. I think regardless, even if we have to give back a pawn, which I think we do, I don't think we have a choice there, this should still be winning. Mostly because white's queenside pawns should fall. I believe. I believe they should fall. And, you know, I'm on 30 seconds on my clock, which obviously is my own fault for using so much time. But this is an easier line to go for than the rook to d8 stuff. Of course, we'll check with the engine. And I think the engine will probably prefer rook to d8. But with no time on the clock, I don't want to have to deal with those very complicated lines. Here, 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 here. Here. Doesn't quite work, does it? I'm going to go rook e5. This knight can't check my king because of the geometry between them. This kind of like diagonal sort of relationship makes it very hard for this knight to attack this king. So I don't have to worry about checks. Even so, I'd have just king g7 defending the rook. I'm just defending my d5 pawn here. And that way, the material is still dead equal, except I'm up the exchange. It's equal in terms of the pawns. And also, white can't really avoid some kind of trade because of the alignment, right? And yeah, this looks pretty nice. I mean, knight to e4 is probably a serious threat because knight takes, rook takes, king takes, and let's say rook takes or pawn takes. Equal material, bishop versus rook endgame. Obviously, the rook should be winning. I still have to, you know, actually do it, but it should be winning, especially with the amount of pawns left. There's also no rush because this pin is going nowhere. I call it a pin because I force a trade of rooks if the knight moves, which obviously white doesn't really want. I can't really go king g7 because the knight to h5 check. Oh, wait, can I take that? No, I can't because the bishop defends that. That doesn't work out, so still got to be careful. Still got to be careful. We'll see what my opponent does. He's obviously got much more time on the clock than I do, but we should still be able to convert this without too much of a problem. But we will see. We will see. Are there any other ideas? I can't get the knight to e3 as much as I would love that. Again, the relationship it's the exact same relationship, right? It takes forever to get the knight to that square. I'd have to go like this. Although knight d3 is a perfectly good move, attacking b2. Problem is, like, b3 and then where is the knight going? Like, doesn't really have a good place to go. So, kind of pointless to do that, I think. Okay, my opponent's taking his time, which is good, but also kind of hoping he's not finding a good move somehow. I don't think there's any particularly good moves, though. I do have to be aware of knight d7 ideas. Obviously, my knight is currently defending that. I do have to be aware of knight to g4. That doesn't work because I have rook to f1. If king takes, then I'll just move my rook. That's fine. If he does go for it, okay, interesting. Let's take. Yeah, I can just take and then you can't take because take. That's the point. So after you take, I'll just give you a check. Go h5. That's no problem. No problem at all. And then, yeah, we secure the trading of the rooks, which is the whole idea. And like I said, the pawns are equal, and being a rook for a bishop should be winning, but again, we do still have to convert this endgame. This should be a good lesson in endgame conversion. I think rook f5, so king f1, rook f5, let's say king to g2, h5, knight to e3, rook over. It's not simple. Not simple. King g2. I don't have to do this, though, do I? I can just move my king. That's probably easier. Just so h6 is well defended. This knight can't really attack the king. It would take it, you know, a couple moves. Again, this is just geometry, which I recognize. And the king is on a dark square, which makes everything more simple. Because it can't be hit by this bishop, of course. We could probably put the knight on e4 and threaten like h5 rook to f2 with good effect. Also would be hitting g3. I think we should do it anyway, because white can't afford to trade like this. You could argue I'm complicating things by lining everything up with the light squared bishop, which would be a fair criticism. However, h5 is a serious threat, because when the knight moves, I have rook to f2. Currently, the knight is defending that square. And then I'll pick up the bishop. Although, not necessarily. h5, knight e3, rook f2, king h3. The knight is defended by... Sorry, the bishop is defended by the knight, but... Okay, c4, that's a good idea. Strong move. Let's go h5. My opponent's playing some good moves. I think this is fine. Oh, that's an idea. No, that's an idea. I admittedly missed that. Again, should still be okay, though. Oh, no, this is fine. This is fine. And honestly, it's pure luck. Because the bishop can't move and defend the pawn at the same time. Because we control f3 and the king is in the way. So that's actually very lucky. And then we gain access to like d2. Also, the king can't come to f3, which is, again, just pure luck. My opponent, yeah, actually played quite well to try and make something happen there. c4 is a very good move. Not sure if we had something more accurate here. Like, maybe rook g5 was better. And if take, then take. If king f3, you can just do this, probably. Although I don't really like the fact he has a passed pawn. So, oh no, knight f6 just wins. Rook g5 might have been more accurate. Also lining up with g3. But okay, yeah, this is also fine. The tactics just work out in our favor, which on one level is luck, on another level is good piece placement, but that's up for you to decide. I mean, there's really no good squares for this bishop to go to be fair. I mean, maybe you could try and put it on b3, but I'll give this check. I'll pick up the b2 pawn. And you can't hold that endgame because the king gets forced to the back rank, which is even worse because it can't advance forwards, which means that I can just bring my king on the dark squares as long as g4 doesn't fall, which I obviously won't allow, because I can always put my rook on b4 if the bishop moves. Then I can eventually sack my rook for the bishop, most likely, or force a passed pawn through, and that'll be game over. So yeah, my opponent's still thinking. Not sure what about exactly. I'm very interested to check this game over and see exactly what the engine thinks. I mean, like, in this position, for example, I'm sure it will prefer the move rook to d8, but it just seems unnecessarily complicated. No, we should just take this. It's far easier. Far easier to take. And you literally can't stop me from coming to d2. It's actually quite bad as well, because you don't have b3, because after rook d2, the king is forced to the back rank, and then I have rook d1 picking up the bishop. I didn't have it here because the king comes to f1 and covers the e1 square, and I didn't want to do like this, and the bishop coming back to e4, because, yeah, I win this pawn, but why am I allowing a passed pawn at all? There's absolutely no need. This king still can't go anywhere meaningful. It could maybe come to f2, but I'd give a check. And the problem for white is that I'll pick up the b2 pawn with an attack on the bishop. So you again have to respond to that. Yeah, you can do that. If I pick this up, he'll pick this up. Again, he's being quite stubborn here. Fair enough. Could bring my king. Here. That's pretty awkward. I like that move. We maintain attack here, defense here. And if my king comes to e5, the game is all but over. Yeah, now I have this. And white is running out of moves. Because you can't move the bishop. You can move this pawn, but like... I'll just do this. And now you have no choice but to move the king back. And then I can just take. And if you come forward, I'll just come back. And if the king goes back, then I'll just move the pawn. Or actually, I might just sack, which is also an option. Probably no need, though. Probably no need. This is a nice little zugzwang position. Of course, you can't take because the bishop falls. And the king just doesn't have much movement whatsoever. So this is kind of an aesthetic ending, I think. I think it may be unnecessary. Like, in the previous position, I maybe could have been a bit more simple with the way I went about the conversion, but it seems pretty winning to me. Seems pretty winning. Yeah, let's just advance the pawns. And then I'll play king e5. Nah, let's just do this, defend. I don't want to allow this. Move up, everything's defended, and I can throw the a-pawn down the board. And okay, there we go. My opponent eventually resigns. Good game. 3 mistakes. Interesting. So, obviously, like, I was showing you the way that I like to play against the alien Gambit. And the way my opponent went about it with g4, admittedly, I have never seen before. But 91% accuracy is pretty damn good overall. Like 2,500 performance rating. Pretty good. So, of course, we have knight to f6 here. And this is the beginning of the Tartakower if white takes. And I've got loads of videos on my channel in the Tartakower if you are interested. But my opponent goes knight g5. And again, h6, take, knight f3, and I think c5 is the correct line. Correct. And, you know, you can see the evaluation in black's favor. But, like, I don't like getting involved in all of that. I prefer bishop to f5. And the engine will say the evaluation is dead equal. But like I said before, white is here to attack. He goes bishop c4. e6, of course, blocking off the diagonal. And this is, I would say, a very easy position for black to play. Again, I have an Alien Gambit video that will be linked below going over everything that you can do against it with this setup. And then g4, which I've never seen, and taking with the bishop is the best move. f3, just drop the bishop back. Perfectly fine. Bishop f4, I go bishop d6, which is good. Bishop g3. Okay, bishop g6 is a bit of a mistake. My gut instinct with h6 was actually better. After the knight retreats. Okay, I see. We can just castle. And the problem for white is this knight can't develop because this knight hangs. So I can see why that is a big problem. But okay, I went bishop g6. And you could argue that I was playing for tricks here, which maybe I shouldn't have done in retrospect. My opponent goes knight 1 to h3, which was the move I was calculating. We go h6, winning a pawn by force. My opponent castles. Take on g3. Yeah, best move. Castles, best move. Because these pieces are scary. But as we saw, there was no actual attack. c3, knight d7, rook f4. Now bishop g6. Now I wanted to go bishop g6 here. But I was concerned about knight f4. And then I have to go back to f5. And then I was like, well, g4 is maybe a bit scary. Computer says, no, it isn't. You're an idiot. But, you know, why am I allowing any counterplay? Let's just instead wait for rook f4, then go bishop g6. Queen f3. Okay, e5 is the best move. Awesome. My other consideration was knight to f6, which is okay, but not quite as good. Because I was like, well, maybe I can block this up. But the bishop can always come back to this diagonal. So it's not as cut and dry. e5, though, I was dead happy with. Of course, you can't take. The attack is over. You're done for. The center opens up. So, rook g4, as expected. Bishop h5 isn't actually the best move. King h8 is, which I did consider, actually. But I thought there was no need for it. I thought, well, the queen just moves, and then I can't win any material. I know I'm up 2 pawns, but... okay, I went bishop to h5. Of course, rook g7 is the only move by a country mile. The second best move is rook f1, in which case I either have knight to f6, or I can just take and do something like this, and you have nothing. So, rook g7, king g7, queen h5. We go queen f6. Computer preferred knight f6, which I saw, but I didn't like this. Yeah, it wants rook e8, which I don't think is a very human way to go about the position, because the king looks bare. But by playing queen f6, it looks like I'm adding a lot of defense to the king. Rook f1, queen g6, queen f3, rook a to e8, which is the best move. I thought there was no need to take because knight f4 looked a little bit scary. Computer finds knight e5 counterattack. But after, let's say queen e2. Oh, then I take on g3. So queen f2. Queen g5. It makes sense, but I thought it was more simple to play rook a to e8, which is the best move. Queen f2. f6 isn't the best move. Knight f6 is better. But I liked f6 because I thought it shored everything up. Bishop b3, best move. Of course, trying to access c2, which is white's only real way to try and create counterplay. And to be fair, he did create counterplay. Bishop b3, queen g4, best move. Awesome. And it should make sense why, as I explained in the game. And as, you know, we saw in the game. King g2. Here, queen e4 checks the best move, which I did see, but I was like, well, what's the point? It wants f5, which, yeah, okay, I mean, sure, but like... That's, okay, I'm never seeing this. Obviously, now you see it. It's like, oh, yeah, obviously, but come on now. Why would you go for that? As in, the complications are unnecessary. ed4. Knight f4, best move, which was a good find because this is a big threat. It also stops me from going queen e4. If you change the move order and go bishop d1 first, and I have queen to e4 check, and like queen e3, and I probably force a queen trade. you know, you can't do this because d3. So knight f4 is a good move. Knight c5 is the best response. Bishop d1, queen g5, awesome. My other consideration was queen d7, which is okay, but I was very scared of this. Computer says this and I'm fine. And yeah, okay, the queen is hit by the rook, so the knight's pinned, but why would I go for this? Queen g5, knight h5, king h8 is better than this, so that's awesome. Queen d4, and yeah, okay, so I'm correct. This is considered an inaccuracy, although it's also completely winning. The computer does want rook d8, but I did not see why I should go for this. In fairness, the only way for the queen to avoid a queen trade or getting lost is a move like queen c4, in which case you probably get slaughtered. I saw this, but the follow-up here is knight to e4, which I did not see. It just looks scary with things pointed at my king and all my pieces leaving the defense of the king. Now, if you see this position, you could say, well, f6 is well defended, and actually the queen can't do anything. But seeing that from this position is a different story. So I went for the queen trade. Knight f6 is an inaccuracy. Rook e5, knight g4, we trade, and I go rook f5. King g7, just defending the pawn. Bishop c2. Okay, knight e4 is the best move, but after c4... Oh no, this is the best move. Okay. But it's because the computer sees this line. And admittedly, I didn't originally see it. A little bit lucky, but also my pieces are well placed. And here, the endgame is hopeless for white. Because I get to this position. And by the way, if white doesn't go for this, he has nothing. Like, he has nothing. So he has to. It's the best move. And then rook b4. White is in zugzwang. a3, rook a4. White literally can't move any other piece than the king. And then I take with check. I return. The king moves again. And I can save the pawn. And yeah, in this position, my opponent resigns because two connected passed pawns, rook versus bishop. I'm dominating his king. He's never winning the g-pawn. Absolutely nothing left here. So, very interesting game. I hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully enjoyed, you know, taking down the alien gambit. I know a lot of you like to play it yourselves. I know a lot of you struggle against it. So if you do want to see how to destroy it, obviously this video was helpful, but full guide to beating the alien gambit up here. Go check it out. I was really happy with that video. And if you want to see all the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down here. Thank you very much for watching. And I'll see you in one of those videos.